Hello, and welcome to the El Camino studio. This is lesson 2, the second part of the Camino coloring book, coloring lessons. Last time we were working on the third page of the coloring book, a landscape of the Navarra region of northern Spain. The Camino coloring book is 26 pages of coloring templates that chronicle the way of the Camino de Santiago, the Camino Francais. In this exercise, we'll be doing the coloring in watercolor. You'll need just a basic set of watercolor paints, basic brushes, and a few different items like paper towels. In watercolor, we always start from the lightest color and work to the darker color because it's easier to add than it is to take away. So in the last lesson, we put down all the yellow that we think we're going to need in all the particular places that we need them. So now we're going to progress to the sap green. We're going to do the same thing with the sap green. We're going to go and cover all the areas that we figure we're going to have green. In the original drawing, we could see that there was very large differences in the intensity of the greens. The trees that I'm working on now end up being quite dark and saturated. Some of the edges of the vineyard were dark, but for this first layer of green, we're going to work very lightly and just put a light wash of green everywhere. And we'll return and do multiple layers to increase the intensity of the darker areas. By the time we finish this drawing, you'll have gone over it so many times that you'll know this landscape intimately, and it'll become a very familiar place. When you walk across the 800 kilometers of the Camino that goes through northern Spain, it sort of breaks down into 3 areas. You have the lush areas of here, the Navarra, and then you get into the flat plains of the Meseta, and which are dry and somewhat arid. And then you get into the final segment of the Galicia, which is mountainous and much wetter and very dense forests. And you can see the wide variety that is Spain. Each is so different and so compelling. For this part of what I'm doing is I'm using a flat brush. I like to use a flat brush because it gives me a much sharper edge as I'm doing all these irregularities in the profile of the bushes and the trees. You can use it like a little wedge, and I find it gives much crisper line. When we draw and paint, we're always mindful of our light source. In this case, my light source is coming from the right, the sun. And I'm trying to, when I load my brush to start painting, the first few strokes are always a little bit more saturated, and they get drier and thinner as I go along. So when I start to put the brush down initially somewhere, I'm trying to keep that saturated brush on the side of the shaded area of the trees or the bushes, and then work my way to the light area, and that will give me a little bit of a tonal gradation between light and dark of the shade that I want at the end anyway. So this helps, this will help you keep it under control, so you don't end up with too dark of an area where you're supposed to have the sunshine and the brighter more faded leaves. I've finished now with putting a light wash of green over the whole area, and now I've changed to a much more sharp and pointed brush, and I'm going to go and build my next layer of intensity, and I'm starting off in the bottom left hand corner. A smaller brush because we're covering much smaller areas, and we're getting a little bit more into the shape of the trees and the undergrowth. If you find in the future that you really love doing the watercolors, then these economy brushes they won't take you that far. What you're going to have to look for in a brush, what you really want, is a brush that has longer bristles and much more of them, a fuller body in the head of the brush. The more bristles you have, the more you are able to retain the watercolor liquid in the brush, and it'll give you a longer duration of coloring. These short ones, they only really allow for short strokes before you have to refill the brush again. But the good quality brushes can become quite expensive. So until you're sure that you need them, these will get you there. Artists really have no sense of time, me included. When I first planned my pilgrimage walk across Spain, I thought, okay, I'll paint and draw and sketch all the way across Spain, and by the time I finished, I'll have filled a whole sketchbook full of drawings and paintings. But when I got there, I realized after the first or second day, there just isn't the time available to do that. Because I had to plan to do the Camino in roughly about a month, and that involved about 20 to 30, 35 kilometers a day of walking. So you start in the morning and you walk and you walk and you walk, and by the time you're in the late afternoon, you're arriving at your daily destination. Then you have to go find a hostel or a albergue and find a place to sleep, and then you have to get something to eat and get settled in, and you have to do your laundry because you don't carry that much. You have to do your laundry every day, and by the time you turn around, it's getting dark, so you don't have any more time, and you really don't have the energy anymore to spend a few hours doing a sketch. So when I reached Pamplona about 4 or 5 days into the walk, I went to the local post office and mailed back all my art supplies, the watercolor paper, the watercolor brushes, the paints, and all the rest of it. Because there's no time to do it, and you're just carrying excess baggage. Excess baggage is one thing you don't want to carry. A lot of the pilgrims, they have guidebooks to get them across Spain, and each day of walking they just tear out that page and throw it out just to make it ever so much lighter. So now I'm doing another pass over the full page, and I'm just increasing and adding details and trying to work on building some higher contrast between the lights and darks, and working on some shadows. I'll go over it a few more times before I'm happy with the vegetation. And once I finish with the green, then I'll proceed to the next color. But as you go, you see that there's little areas that you've missed and that need to be done. I can see on the right-hand side there's a sand cliff that I completely forgot to do, and so I'll be going over that as well. But It's always good to work over the whole drawing at the same time, because you can see where it's going, and you're not overstressing the paper by being wet. It's dry, it has lots of time to dry in between. In this early part of the Camino, you spend a lot of time walking along paved country roads, and the rest of the time walking through dirt paths alongside fields and through bush areas, and you see very little of the busy highways and those kind of things. So it is very, very peaceful at this point. When you get further along into the Camino, you end up going through some larger cities, and you spend a number of hours just walking through the suburbs and the more commercial areas of town. But you start to relish these quiet stretches where there's very little people and very little built up village towns. It's very peaceful. It would be nice if we just spend a year doing this 800-kilometer walk, and just then you could sit down and paint and spend an extra day here and 2 or 3 days there. But we all live with time constraints, so we can't do that. So we have to do what we can. So now I'm getting down to the last major pass over the page with the green. And now you can see that my mixture has become very rich. I'm using less and less water to water the watercolor down, because now I want to really make the trees jump off the page. So the trees are, the dark side, the shaded side of the tree is getting a very thick mixture of saturated paint. And the green is enough to carry it. I don't need to add black to darken in any way. Now you can see what happened to the first layer of green we put over the whole page. It's becoming, in contrast to the dark side of the tree, very, very light, almost white by comparison. So now you can see the benefit of doing that first layer very lightly. So we're almost at the end of this portion, and the next portion we'll be doing the different colors. So I hope you enjoyed this, and hope to see you in the next one.